Margaret, thank you.
Okay, so we'll call the meeting to order at 6:02. And if everybody could just stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to welcome everybody tonight to our budget hearing. If you have any comments, you can email them to boecomment@cohoes.org.
Okay, roll call.
Roll call.
Okay, Mrs. Giller,
Here.
Mr. Jackson,
Here.
Mr. Pascal, Mrs. Dion,
Here.
Mrs. Annalee,
Here.
Mr. Nolan,
Excused.
Mrs. Carey.
Excused. Okay, so we can get into our district budget presentation.
Thank you. I'd like to welcome and thank the Board of Education members, and also thank all of our participants this evening who are joining us from their homes. So thank you. Erin, we're ready to begin with the presentation. Thank you. Great. So can you make that a little bigger? Let's see. I'll make my screen bigger, I guess. Okay, looks great. Thank you. So here we see our smiling, beautiful faces of our children, and it reaffirms our mission of preparing our students for success in tomorrow's world and preparing them for the best future possible. Okay, so this slide, you may remember this slide from our March 11th board meeting. We have updated it a little bit, and it really details our budget process. And we've had a long process this year, longer than we've ever had because of the circumstances. So you may recall last fall, we developed our budget goals and we reviewed our long-range financial plan. We conducted our needs assessment, and we met with principals, our elementary BLTs, our teacher leaders, our CSEA folks, as well as our reps from special areas to determine needs and priorities, and that occurred in December. And then step 2, our budget committee meetings. On this committee, I'd like to thank Nadia and Rick, and the committee assembled in January, and in fact, we just stopped meeting in May. So this was very much appreciated, and we met with principals and directors, and we received their budget submissions last January, and we reviewed it, and we continue to refine these budget submissions. Step 3, we delivered the preliminary budget to our board. We reviewed our line item budget with our committee and with our board as well. And we also received recommendations from our administrators for efficiencies and reductions. And you may recall our first budget presentation began February 26th. Step 4, feedback. We circled back to our principals, our directors, the leaders of our CPA, CTA, and CSEA units, and the budget committee for feedback and further recommendations. And at our last board meeting on May 20th, last week, our Board of Ed took action and adopted our property tax report card and our spending plan. Before you go to the next slide, I would like to call your attention to the circle in the middle. You can see our stakeholders, our students, our staff, and our community members, our taxpayers are at the center of that circle as our stakeholders, and they were at the heart of every decision that we made during this difficult budget season. I'd also like to call your attention to the symbolism of a circle. We had no idea when we developed this slide back in March, pre-COVID, but when I think of a circle, I think of unity, and I think that with a lot of curveballs that were thrown at us this year in this budget season, that we came together. It was challenging. There were decisions that we had to make that were very difficult, but in the end, we were unified and we came together. So I'm very grateful, very, very grateful to everybody for that. Let's think also about what another symbolic measure of a circle, and that is infinity. So I'm hoping that we don't have any more curveballs thrown our way and that this budget process is finally completed. So that's my hope. Next slide, please. So district enrollment, you can see that our enrollment is relatively flat for the next school year. There are some spikes or increases at the middle school of some students. So this is what our projections, and this is what we based our budget on as well. COVID impact on our New York State budget and our state finances and the potential financial impact to our school district. As you know, there are 3 measurement periods where districts may experience further reductions in foundation aid. The first period planned to be communicated in late May, early June after the first measurement conclusion. We're still waiting to hear from the governor on that. And the second period being May 1st through June 30th, and the third period defined as July 1 through December 31st. The governor has advised that a takeback could happen and could potentially be up to 10%. This would result in a $1.67 million reduction, which would be catastrophic to our school district in state aid for Cohoes. So we are hoping from the HEROES Act that our state will receive monies from the federal government, and those monies will be funded to localities, including school districts. Next slide. Stacy?
Yeah, good evening. So the 2021 proposed budget is just under $43.9 million. It does represent a 0% and $0 increase over the current year budget. And it supports our students in both a fiscally and an educationally responsible manner. We did do our due diligence to preserve the quality of education through the budget process, as you had just discussed. Next slide, please. So 5-year trend is 1.72%, and really the outliers are 17-18, fiscal year 17-18, where we capped our growth at just under 1%, and the current proposed budget where we capped growth to 0% in order to keep that under the 2%. Next slide, please. So a 3-part budget. This is a required slide for the budget hearing. It represents plain language. 72% of our budget is made up of program costs. This includes salaries and benefits for our teaching staff as well as pupil services. It also includes instructional materials and supplies, textbooks, extracurricular activities, including athletics, BOCES program costs, and contractual transportation costs. So nearly 17% of the proposed budget is capital costs, which includes salaries and benefits for our maintenance and our custodial staff, as well as our debt service, which is bond payments on our buildings based off of the schedule. It also includes utility costs, insurance, and tax certiorari costs. Administrative is 11% of our budget, and this includes our salaries and benefits for administrative staff as well as our clerical staff. It also includes curriculum development and research and planning programs. It includes tax collection costs as well as legal and auditing costs and central data processing costs. Next slide, please. This is an expense summary that highlights really our instructional and employee benefits represent 78.5% of our total budget. You will notice the employee benefits changed $279,000. That is mainly attributed to healthcare costs and retirement costs. You will note that the instructional line item, the change is only $30,000, and that's really attributed to the reductions and the efficiencies that we'll talk about later in the presentation. Operations and maintenance is a reduction. The current year budget includes a capital outlay of $100,000, which is not included in the 2021 budget. We also did have a reduction in BOCE services, HR services in this line item, and under the current year, and we reduced equipment in that category. Transportation costs, we did eliminate the CDTA contract services, and we also did reduce field trips. Again, debt service is based off the schedule, and that's our bond payments on our buildings. Next slide, please. So the revenue summary, state and building aid, we are very dependent on state aid. It's 55% of our revenue budget. Again, state aid for next year is uncertain with the look-back periods, and we don't know the results of those look-back periods as of yet. So that is concerning. Property taxes represent 37% of our overall budget. It's a 2.32% increase. Consumer utility taxes are on trend. Really no change there. Payment in lieu of taxes represent 4% of our revenue budget, and there is a modest increase there based off of the schedules provided, and there's 2 new pilots for next year. Interfund revenues represent 2% of the total budget, and we just want to be mindful that we are exhausting our ERS and our TRS reserves, and that will present a revenue gap for us next year. Fund balance, just about $117,000. Ideally, that would be 0. It is 0% of the budget. We will monitor that throughout the year next year. Next slide, please. Tax cap calculation. This has been a requirement since the 2012-2013 budget year. It is reported to the Office of the State Comptroller March 1st annually. This year, our maximum allowable levy is just over $16 million. Again, that is a 2.32% increase, and that will allow for $363,000 in new revenue for the school district. Next slide, please. The estimated tax rate for 2021 is $37.80. That is based off of preliminary assessment roll. The city will finalize that roll. It's expected to be finalized July 1st. So again, that is an estimate, and that number will change. Based off of a home with $150,000 plus value, the annual impact is $59.60, and on a monthly basis, it's about $5. That is before any exemptions, but the good news is the STAR exemption, the basic STAR exemption, is not expected to change for next year. It'll remain at $539. The estimates are for $539 to remain flat, so that's good news. Next slide, please. So what happens if the budget is defeated? If the budget is defeated based off of our very tight timeline, the district would adopt a contingency budget. It's likely that that would happen at the June 17th meeting unless we decided to have a special meeting for that. Allowable expenses under a contingent budget are basically anything that's mandated by statute, legally required, and items that are necessary to maintain programs, preserve our properties, and assure health and safety. So under a contingent budget, we would be required to make additional reductions, nearly $400,000. The biggest portion would be to district-wide materials and supplies, over $200,000. This would impact our classroom supplies, phys ed, our art supplies, music, our science program, basically all general programming would be impacted. We would also need to eliminate the 17,000 in field trips that are for guidance and for program curriculum based. They would be eliminated. We would also eliminate equipment under buildings and grounds and music and district-wide conferences under a contingent budget. Next slide, please.
So the budget features, as Stacy said, the budget growth is capped at 0%. The proposed tax levy increase is 2.32%. ERS and TRS reserves are exhausted, and the appropriated fund balance represents 0% of total revenue. And reductions and efficiencies included in this budget proposal amount to $1.6 million. So we had to make many difficult decisions to come to that 1.6 million mark, and we've made many efficiencies and reductions. As Stacy said, we eliminated CDTA, contract busing services. We terminated our lease agreement with Holy Trinity for the Care Alternative Program. We restructured Northern Rivers to now have 2 clinicians in a fee-for-service model, one at the middle school, one at the high school. We've eliminated software, our SNN Communications, Huddle for Sports, Schoolzilla, and Passport for Good. We've reduced BOCES services in grant writing, arts and education, cap it to a 3-day model for the high school, and nursing services transitioning to an in-house model. This is where it's really tough to take. We had to make some very heartbreaking decisions in eliminating positions. We have eliminated an administrative position through attrition, 10.9 teachers, some of those through attrition, 3 teacher assistants, 2 aides through attrition, and 1 secretary through attrition, and 1 security guard, and 1.5 parent liaisons. We've also reduced summer hours for some staff members, reduced building subs for this year and for the next school year, equipment and furniture, materials and supplies, field trips, athletic uniforms, curriculum writing, 6 clubs, and high school intramurals. Next slide, please. So qualifications and registration of voting. So we utilize a system of voting based on personal registration. All registered voters will automatically be mailed an absentee ballot for the budget vote and board election. Voter registration requirements, again, to be a qualified voter, you have to be a U.S. citizen, at least 18 years of age, a resident of the school district for at least 30 days, and then you can be a registered to vote in the general elections or with our school district. Next slide. If you are not registered, please contact our district clerk, Joanne Maloney, or the Albany County Board of Elections, or you may go directly to the Department of Motor Vehicles and register online. So tonight is our budget hearing. Absentee ballots will also be mailed out this week. The budget notice will be mailed to residents on June 3rd. And we ask if you would like more information, please visit our website with a lot of detailed information, whereas this year's budget notice will definitely be scaled back. On June 9th is the annual budget vote and board elections. We have 2 open seats and we have 2 board candidates. We have Margaret Giller and we have newcomer Peter Annaly, who happens to be Helen's husband. So we're thrilled about that. Absentee ballots must be received by the district office at 21 Page Ave by 5 p.m. And we have some inspectors who've been board approved at our last meeting who will be counting the votes on June 10th. And then we will announce the results immediately following that. So a big thank you to our school community for each year supporting our school district, supporting our children, supporting our staff, and supporting our mission of preparing our students for success in tomorrow's world. So a huge thank you. Next slide. And we extend our deepest gratitude to our Board of Education, our administrators, and our staff who worked so hard with us and collaborated with us on developing this year's budget. We know it wasn't easy, but we all came together and we were all very respectful on behalf of our students and our community, and with them at the heart of our decision. So I thank everybody. And now questions from the board or from anyone who would like to submit a public comment, please email it to boardofedcomment@cohoes.org. Thank you.
It's Helen. I don't have a question. I have just a comment that I want to make. I know that my husband's running for the board. Just so everybody knows, I will be off the board. We won't be, I don't think we can be on together, but we definitely won't be on together. So I just wanted to make that clear.
You'll be passing your seat on to your husband.
Yes.
Could I ask about the vote? So there will be no in-person voting. It's only through the absentee ballots. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes, and we are actually sending out 9,500 ballots to all of the registered voters in Cohoes. So I'm recommending as soon as our residents receive the ballot at home, fill it out, okay, and then mail it back in, and don't wait, just make sure that they meet the deadline of the 5 p.m. on June 9th.
So is there any local discretion to that, or is this part of the state restrictions?
So we are a personal registration. That is how we utilize voting, and that's how our board has approved voting and adopted voting to take place in our city. So with that, that's how we were going to proceed, what has already been established in our school district as a personal registration district. Is that clear, Mark?
Does that mean that it was established by past precedent? Because we haven't sent out ballots before, only absentees, so.
Right. No, it's not.
Okay.
So again, I'm not exactly sure if it's definitely something that we have always done. I believe that it was a board adoption many years ago. I would have to look through that, but this is how we've always conducted our board elections, through personal registration.
The voting by absentee ballot is based off an executive order.
Okay, I think the question was if there could be in-person voting where someone could come in and place a vote, and if that was an executive order or if that was by choice.
No, the ballots are all by executive order by the governor. If somebody wanted to drop off their ballot at Page Ave, we will have a box in front of 21 Page Ave, and they can do that.
I just had a comment. I just wanted to thank everybody throughout this process. It has been a very difficult one, and as we said, this was not the budget that we had planned to adopt. As far as the board action items, I feel like we have put together a very fair tax levy and a very responsible allocation within the budget, total budgeted amount. And so I'm hopeful that our residents will see that and that we've worked really hard to get this budget passed. So thank you to everyone. Rick and Nadia, I know you guys put a lot of time in that. So in your nice, healthy paid positions that you have here. Does anybody else have any other comments? Okay, so I'm just gonna go into questions from the audience comments. We have a couple that have been sent in here. Bill Smith. I think we already answered this question, but are schools open for an open vote and on budget, open vote on budget and election day? Statewide primaries are now walk-in if folks choose to vote in person. I find it more beneficial if voting in person is more important now than ever, as folks voting by ballot may vote out of spite with a no vote. because they can, and these will be the same people that never voted before. Also, I know it's never easy, and I congratulate the board, Jennifer, Peggy, and Stacy, for the hard but difficult work over the stressful times.
So we definitely would prefer face-to-face voting. Unfortunately, this is the governor's order, and this is what how it must be conducted for school districts.
Okay, thank you. Here's another question from Mike Carter. As you're aware, Congress is currently debating another stimulus package that will likely have funding for states. This will mean that funding available would increase. How would that impact the budget? And is there a contingency for that budget if this occurs?
So again, it depends on how much is awarded to New York State. And then the legislature, remember, once the governor decides how much is going to be dispersed to schools, the legislature has 10 days to decide if they would like to change that. The pot of money is the pot of money, but they can allocate differently depending on how the governor allocates that. So at this point, we're not sure, first of all, about how much those monies will be. But the governor has said that it could be a 10% loss in foundation aid. And again, that would be very catastrophic for us. And have I decided what or where we would make those cuts? No, I haven't. And that would be going back to the budget committee, going back to the board, starting the process, really revisiting and resuming the process of our circle. So that's when we hope infinity doesn't happen.
And Jennifer, just to be clear, that if it were a 10% reduction, that would be $1.6 million.
Yeah, $1.67 million, correct.
Okay. All right, that's it for our public comments. Anything else from the board? Okay, dates for future meetings, June 3rd and June 17th, live streamed. Can I get a motion to adjourn the meeting at 6:29 p.m.?
Make the motion.
Second.
Okay, Mrs. Giller,
Yes.
Mr. Pascal, Mrs. Annaly,
Yes.
Mr. Jackson,
Yes.
Mrs. Dion.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank
Have a
you.
great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. Great job. Thank you, everybody. Be well.